What does he say? Cast all your anxiety upon him. Now, we need to notice what he doesn't say to do with anxiety. He doesn't say to deny the existence of anxiety. This is not a call to suppression or repression. It is a call to realism. He doesn't suggest that we should ignore anxiety, nor does he suggest that as much as we would like to, that we just run away from it. I knew a person once whose favorite saying was, she never saw a problem that was too big to run away from. Well, you can run, but you can't hide. So instead, Peter gives us a word, a very graphic word here. And it means to hand over to, or to place upon, or to throw upon. You remember when Luke records for us the arrival of Jesus in Jerusalem on the day that we refer to as Palm Sunday? Well, prior to his arrival, somebody went and got a donkey. And they got the donkey and they took coverings and they threw it on the donkey. The same word that is used here. It is graphic and it is important because it gives us a visual picture of what we're supposed to do with our anxiety. Not to throw it in the air aimlessly, not to throw it on our husbands or our wives, no, or our children, but to deliberately and carefully throw it or cast it upon the Lord Jesus Christ. It is important here, though, not to disengage what Peter is saying in verse 7 from what we studied a few weeks ago in verses 5 and 6. Now here the King James Version and the American Standard Version make it a little clearer. They use a different word than cast. They use casting. It says, "Humble yourselves, therefore, under the mighty hand of God, that he may exalt you in due time, casting all your cares upon him, for he careth for you." So they're tied together. You can see that they're tied together. What happens when you humble yourself under God's mighty hand? Well, it transforms the way that you deal with everything, including the way that you deal with anxiety. So as we humble ourselves before God, we are to be casting all of our anxiety upon him. This is simply a further instruction from Peter as to how we should be living our day-to-day lives. Think this through for a moment. If you fly on an airplane, and I've had a few occasions to do that here lately, and if you're anxious about flying all the time, you have to be making some assumptions about the pilot. Okay, if you're anxious, you're making some assumptions about the pilot. You may wonder, does this guy really know what he's doing? Man, I hope he didn't miss the day that they were talking about landing procedures. And this, despite the fact that you don't have a clue as to how to fly the airplane yourself. Well, we can spend the entire flight anxiety-ridden because we're not prepared to humble ourselves to the point where we say, this matter is beyond my control. This is a long flight. The pilots had all the training, and I must do what he said. So what's the pilot tell you? What's he say? Ladies and gentlemen, we've now reached our cruising altitude of 35,000 feet. We'll speak to you later in the trip, but right now, sit back, relax, and enjoy the flight. Okay, so what are you going to do? Are you going to try and fly it yourself from 21B? Or are you going to humble yourself under the pilot's instructions? Now, I recognize that at some point this analogy may break down, but at least in part it is an illustration of what God is saying about how we are to live our lives. He's saying, listen to me. I am the one that cares for you. I know who your children are. I know where you live. I know about your neighbors. I know about your fears of illness. I know all of that, he says. And my instruction to you is to humble yourself. Because our unwillingness to humble ourselves means that we intend to take matters into our own hands. And in many cases, we can't. And when we take matters into our own hands, quite frankly, we consume ourselves with worry, and we reveal, at least to our own hearts, that we are more concerned with ourselves than we are concerned with Him. Oh, we may wish to give the impression that we're concerned with Him, but in actual fact, our deepest concerns, many of our deepest concerns, have to do with our pride rather than making actual progress in His kingdom. Let's illustrate that by taking a look at a very well-known story concerning two sisters who both loved the Lord Jesus, equally so. Turn to the book of Luke, chapter 10, starting at verse 38. Now we know this story. We read, "As Jesus and His disciples were on their way, He came to a village where a woman named Martha opened her home to Him. She had a sister named Mary, who sat at the Lord's feet listening to what He said. But Martha was distracted. Notice the word like divided, distracted, by all the preparations that had to be made. She came to Him and asked, "Lord, don't you care that my sister has left me to do all the work by myself? Tell her to help me." "Martha, Martha," answered the Lord, "you are worried and upset about many things." You know, perhaps that's a word to somebody's heart here this morning. Put your own name in there instead of Martha, Martha. The Lord speaks through His Word. You know you are upset about many things, but only one thing is needed. Mary has chosen what is better, and it will not be taken from her, away from her. Now, what is Jesus saying there? Is He saying that there's no place for the productivity of a Martha? Is He calling for us to be passive? No. To all be like Mary and sit around all day or all evening? No, that's not what He's saying. What He is saying is this, that the posture of Mary needs to be the heart of Martha in the activity of service. That the posture of Mary needs to be the heart of Martha in the activity of service. Otherwise, the preoccupations with what we do for Jesus may rob us of time spent with Jesus, of the enjoyment and the companionship of Jesus, and so create a spirit of bitterness that we will resent the humble spirits of others who have chosen a less frantic way of life.